Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First of all, I want to start with some important words. I'm aware that the person I'm going to talk about, at least his views anyway, his home was invaded by some people who didn't agree with his incendiary views on Palestine. So I was in two minds as to if I should make this video at all, because I really don't want to play a part in adding fuel to the fire. So I'll be honest, I was very hesitant about even doing this quick video. What persuaded me in the end was the all-important fact that my channel is sadly very small in the grand scheme of things. That has its perks, it seems. You can sort of fly under the radar to an extent. So that was the deciding factor for me in the end. If my channel was bigger with a greater reach, honestly, I don't know if I would have made this video now. Maybe I would have made it slightly a little further down the line, because I seriously don't agree with this fellow on most things, and certainly not on this issue. So his views do need to be challenged, but obviously, we are Muslims first, we are not animals. So being Muslim, we have to try and uphold the best of characters. So that is why I feel I was able to express my opinion on this matter now without adding fire to the fuel, so to speak. As you all know, or fuel to the fire, as you all know, or if you don't, I reiterate to my fellow brothers and sisters, I don't advocate violence or abuse of anyone. We are told to persuade with wisdom and knowledge by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is why this is an ideas platform, and I would encourage my viewers to represent Islam with the highest moral character and restraint. Let my brothers and sisters at Atlantic Muslim set an example to the rest. Now, I don't know if Abu Layth realizes this, but what he's essentially opining as an option for the Palestinians is nothing short of ethnic cleansing. It's the textbook definition of it. For example, just listen to me saying the following. I believe all Jews should be taken out of Israel and spread out all over the world where they are safe, and I'll pay for it. A one-way ticket. How about that? And that land, their homes, properties, businesses, and olive groves ought to be given out over to the Muslims in perpetuity. How do I sound? I would be called the most anti-Semitic person since Hitler, because even proposing what for most people the reasonable idea of a two-state solution, the idea of sharing the land with the Muslims, is considered anti-Semitic in most Jewish quarters. In fact, just saying that the Palestinians should be able to defend themselves, a basic human right against Israeli aggression, its apartheid policy, is considered anti-Semitic in America, which is frankly just beyond shocking. Now imagine I propose the full exile of the Jews out of that land. Seriously. Now, if Abu Layth was European, white, say, no question, he'd be called a bigot, a racist, an ethno-nationalist, an Islamophobe by everyone, Muslim and non-Muslim, if they ever came across his views on this issue. We'd all know what to call him. He'd be cancelled, blacklisted, and thrown out, made an outcast overnight. But being a Muslim, I think he'll get a pass from a segment of the Muslim community, his online community in particular, because it's somehow different and acceptable for a Muslim to say something like this about other Muslims. But it doesn't make what he said any less serious. For one thing, it's a pretty ignorant resolution to the whole Middle East conflict, don't you think? And ridiculously unrealistic. Because in all the years of this conflict, I have never heard anybody suggest something like this, apart from maybe Zionist extremists, zealous Israeli colonial settlers, who I'm sure would have no qualms whatsoever in seeing the Muslims just disappear one day in a puff of smoke. I wonder why. A Jewish theocratic ethno-state minus the Arabs is exactly what they pray and dream about in their sleep. It's Hanukkah come early. This is not a resolution, though. It is a fascist's resolution. I can just imagine the Chinese thinking of something like this, the Myanmar military and the Modi Hindutva proposing such a thing in private. So it really tells you where in the continuum of thought this view falls into, the worst, and what company he's in. Simply put, this opinion lies in the far beyond the pale extremist camp. I wonder how he feels about that. I doubt he's figured this out. If it was to happen, it isn't, because it's the dumbest idea ever, but it would be an unprecedented, unheard of move in the modern nation-state era precisely because it's so ridiculous. An entire nation of people voluntarily relocating? Come on, stop smoking whatever it is you're on, man. Get off your stupid high horse. This is outrageous arrogance to suggest that after all that's happened, all the sacrifices, they should just hand over everything, their land, their properties, their possessions, that they stand on, their homes, everything to their oppressors. Seriously, you should be ashamed of yourself for even hypothesizing something like this. Now, his fanboys will say, give me a reason. Stop dismissing it without a reason. My answer would be, it's a dumb idea. That's my reason. Remember when Donald Trump, among other dumb things, suggested that we should use nuclear warheads against hurricanes? Oh, God. Well, this kind of reminds me of that. What do you say to something like that? Do you need to make a logical argument against it? No, because it's so stupid. You just dismiss it. He says that the Prophet ﷺ did hijrah when they were persecuted. Well, yeah, to regroup and then come back and be victorious. It was never a permanent exile, like Abu Layth is suggesting with the Palestinians. So it's a disanalogy at best. He also casually dismisses the significance of Jerusalem to Islam. He suggests that it was only made relevant later after the Prophet ﷺ. What? Is this another one of those Abu Layth crazy moments where he clicks his fingers and something haram becomes halal? Al-Quds is the first Qibla for Muslims. It is attested to in the Quran, the Sahih Hadith literature. So are we really going there? Abu Layth, are we really dismissing the core scriptures of our deen? Be careful, mate. The analogy to do with a house makes no sense either, like everything else. He actually thinks he's onto something, and he's so serious about it with a serious tone of voice and demeanor, almost as if he's solved the entire Middle East conflict single-handedly, whilst the entire world's been failing for decades. And this is his Nobel Prize-eligible announcement of the proposal. Seriously, man. Firstly, I don't know anyone who's lived in their house for thousands of years, which the Palestinians can claim to have lived in Palestine for. Secondly, you can get yourself a new house and make it into a nice home, but you can't recreate your own country, the culture and the memories passed down the generations, the sights and the tastes and the sounds, the graves of your forefathers. The pull of the land is something quite unique. It's the reason why white South Africans, although in precarious positions at times, they would never immigrate. They always express a desire to live and die on that land. And they've only been there for like 300 to 400 years. And the Palestinians have been there for thousands of years. So, with a land/nation, you only get one chance. Then there's the issue around sacrifice and identity. Quite literally, thousands upon thousands of people, Palestinians, have sacrificed their life for their right to a land, to call Palestine their land. The soil is soaked in the blood of martyrs. Then there's the huge dimension of it being Palestine, the Holy Land, that is intimately tied to their religion. And as we know, religion is the most significant thing in a Muslim's life. It's literally a way of life. I don't know of anybody whose house has such a religious significance. I don't know of anyone whose house figures in the Prophet ﷺ's miraculous night journey, or a house that has graveyards at the back with endless rows of ancestors lying in the soil. I don't know of anyone's house that is mentioned in the Quran and the Ahadith. I don't know of any house for which thousands have given their life for, died for, but I have heard of 30 million Russians dying for their motherland. I have heard of the Spartans standing up to 100,000 Persians for their land. I have heard of Ireland fighting the British for 400 years for their land and identity. Fighting for your identity is more precedented and realistic than not fighting and voluntary ethnic cleansing. What Abu Layth is suggesting is so counterintuitive, so against the grain of the human spirit. Frankly, that's just not how mankind works. Abu Layth is highly misinformed about human nature. Mankind fights for its own. That is the pattern of history. We fight for our self-respect, our dignity. We fight for our families. We fight for our homes, and we fight for the soil our fathers stood on. But it turns this into coward shaming, as if he's been fed this crap by Mossad, because this is exactly the line the Israelis would and do use in their psychological warfare with the Palestinians. And it is what drives much of their policy these days. Inflict enough general pain on the wider population that it's no longer worth the suffering. Break their spirit. You see, the Israelis have tried everything, and they continue to try everything. They're not stupid. By now they know brute military force is not going to help them achieve their goal of a Jewish state just for the Jews. Part of the strategy is also stuff like psychological warfare, bribery, and financial enticement of the Palestinians. Israel's dealings with the UAE is a part of that strategy. If you can create a financial incentive for a Jewish state, because money talks, right, i.e., so the entire Kushner plan under Trump was to essentially promise the Palestinians a huge financial incentive and reward for them to put down their dreams of statehood. So jobs, salaries, corporate investment were dangled before the Palestinians as carrot. As part of the overall Zionist strategy, you also have the psychological component where you make resistance to Israel so costly, the sacrifice so bloody and so high that the Palestinians feel so demoralized, and they have no choice but to sue for peace and give up on their idea of a Palestinian state. Hence you see a high death count amongst civilians. This is not by accident, it's part of the overall Israeli strategy for Palestine. Demoralize them, beat them down enough, don't just kill the terrorists or the militants or the resistance fighters, but the 10 families who are living around them. So then you create a backlash amongst the population where their civilians turn on their resistance fighters, the freedom fighters and the militants and the terrorists amongst them. You are essentially sending them a message that what they're doing is not in their interest. They don't know what they're doing. Everything they feel for their land is in their heads, and it's all crazy. It's pure gaslighting them. All the people who've died, sons and daughters, it was all just mindless passion, a waste of time, a waste of life. But if you're willing to walk away from Palestine and hand over the keys to the land, we'll forget it ever happened. This has been Israel's psychological warfare for some time now. I've seen it literally parroted many times by Israel and its diplomatic and American supporters. So, is it a coincidence that so much of what Abu Layth says, his views, just seem to perfectly align with and give succor to the narrative that wishes to undermine Islam and its ummah? All his opinions and views always seem to side with those who don't have the ummah's interest at heart. Why is that? If you go to his comments, you see a grand coalition of ex-Muslims, Persians longing for Zoroastrianism, Christian apologetists, Israelis, etc., Hindus, and he's given them a home. And he knows it, and he's encouraging it. Once again, I reiterate, we fight this on the battlefield of ideas. We do not resort to violence, intimidation, or abuse. We are better than that. We are Muslim, an example to the world. Take care. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.